Hey everybody, it's Natalie McKenzie, and welcome to another episode of Living Life Authentically with yours truly. We're chatting with interesting people who are doing just extraordinary things and making an impact in their community. We're also highlighting unsung heroes, and some of them sung heroes who you've just not had a chance to get to know better. Well, today we have the privilege of talking with someone that I have held in such high regard. She's a legend, an icon, and we often just refer to her by her first and last name. But today I'll put a handle on it. I'll give her all her titles and her accolades because they're well deserved. This woman of great strength and courage has been blazing the trails long before we knew women were doing so many impactful things, especially here in New York City and in New York State. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome today's guest, none other than Dr. Hazel Dukes.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Dukes, thank you so much for joining us. You are the president of NAACP New York State chapter, and we are just delighted that you could join us today. Tell us about yourself, because your name is synonymous with NAACP, with activism, with anything moving in New York, especially Harlem, Manhattan, Midtown. Tell us how you got to be the Hazel Dukes that needed no introductions.
I guess you're right. Let me just say that it's been a long journey, a journey that with, like all other journeys, disappointments, joy, happiness, and meeting people from all walks of life. So that makes the journey with all its pitfalls that sometimes make it a great journey. For me, it's been 4 decades. I've been involved in NAACP 44 years now. Started in college, and then through my church, being asked to become a membership person, chair of a committee. And I said, what is that responsibility? They said, well, you go out and get memberships. NAACP is a membership organization. I said, oh, I can do that. And I did for several years. My church won a gold cup because I got more members. I love people, and I'm a great salesperson in something that I believe in. And so I did that for many years. And then in the local chapter, I became a vice president. Served in that position for 4 years. And then I was elected president of the local branch. And from the local branch, I got involved in region. That it is Connecticut, New England, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. That makes up the Northeast region. So I became involved in that, and you travel to regional meetings and you meet different people. We were then allowed to have dinners in hotels, during my parents' time, they didn't have that opportunity.
Okay, so Dr. Dukes, and that's quite an interesting spin in how you got involved so early in college. But walk us back a little bit and tell us where you're from. Where were you born? Give us a little context.
I was born
of your family.
Yes, I was born in Montgomery, Alabama. Only child. I have an adopted sister. My dad was a Pullman Porter, and that's how we came to New York.
Now,
Pullman Porter, not the subway of the New York City. This was the railroad that the black men worked on, and they were called Pullman Porters. We moved to Queens.
So for those of us who don't know, give us a little context, because I understand the relevance of the Pullman Porters. But tell us a little bit about who they were and what they did and why that is so relevant.
Well, they were all black men. At that time, they were called black men. They worked on the railroad. They were the people that served the people who was in first class. They were the one that put the luggage on the train, as they do on the on airlines. They had to take the luggage, put it on in the cars where they were supposed to be. They served the people. They didn't collect tickets or money, anything. That was for the white conductors. And I'm sure you and most of your listeners have heard we in Black History Month, A. Philip Randolph, who was the head of the Pullman Porters. I had a chance to see Mr. Randolph in our family home in Queens. He came, my dad was a part of organizing the union for the Black Pullman Porters. My dad had because he was born in the South and because he had a understanding of racism and discrimination, he joined the Black Pullman Porters Association. That was their name. And so my mom was a housewife. She did not work and very quiet and subdued, but my father was not. So my mother always said I was my father's child.
Now, how old were you when your family moved to New York?
I was in 8th grade. I might have the years you get to give me us 14, 15, 15, 15. I was 15. You're getting me to go back in time now.
And so you moved to New York because your father moved for work here.
Absolutely.
And you were living in Queens at the time?
At the time, yes. We moved to Queens.
And what would you say was the most significant difference between moving to New York, living up north, versus growing up down in the South?
Well, for me,
I'm sorry. I think we just lost your audio there.
You lost my audio?
There you go. Now we have you back. Yes.
Okay. I didn't really feel all of the discrimination and racism because I lived in a if you would consider a middle class community where everybody owned their own home, and we were well versed. All of my family were teachers on both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side. They were all teachers, professionals. And I saw Black postmen, Black doctors, Black lawyers, Black store owners. The drugstore was owned by a Black person. The grocery store was owned by a Black person. So I had a isolated, I guess you would call, life where I didn't encounter the real racism as my mother and father had. And so that had my daddy ready to combat racism because he had lived through it in the South.
I see. And so living in New York and watching your father fully engage with his co-workers, being a part of the union, how did that impact you? What is it that lit that fire in you?
I think the little ears, because sometimes when my dad, people would come in, my dad had his little girl on his lap. You know, he wanted to show this little beautiful girl off, his darling daughter, you know, who was dressed prim and proper and had all kind of manners and was eager to say hello, how are you? Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. The Southern courtesy that kids grew up knowing how to respect their elders, not talking while they were talking. But I think the little ears was listening very much to what was being said. And somehow it got into the system. And as I grew and understood more about racism and discrimination, I think that got an urge for me to want to be involved to make a change.
Wow. You know, Dr. Dukes, as I sit here talking with you, I'm overcome with emotions, and I'm having so many feelings and thoughts just listening to you and thinking of the loss of Miss Cicely Tyson. And I think of you and her in the same vein, in that you're such poised women from a time where you could have made different choices, but you stood your ground, you stayed elegant, you stayed honest, you maintained integrity, and you demanded respect, and you impacted the lives of so many others from your actions.
Well, let me tell you, as we talk about Cecily, she was an honorary Delta. I am a Delta, and 3 years ago we were honored together here in New York City as Ruby Ventures on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard. It's a home where Ruby D had grown up in, and a young African American woman operates that facilities now, that location, and she named it Ruby Ventures. And Cecily and myself was honored there 3 years ago.
Wonderful. So tell me a little bit more, because you seem to be such a daddy's girl and really influenced by your dad and your time around him. Your time in high school, what type of student were you? Were you athletic? Were you academic? Tell me a little bit about your time
Well,
in
I
high
played
school.
I played basketball for a while. I was in academics, right? My mom wanted to make sure that I was going to be the teacher. Also, I was going to be following in the footsteps of my aunts and uncles on the dad's side. But then I changed. Most of my peers in high school was saying, "Oh, you don't make money teaching. The world is open to us. We can do more than teach." I have a good friend, lives in Ohio now, and Marie Hewen. I never will forget. One day we were in class, and she said to me, "Listen, Hazel, get that teaching out of your mind. You can be more than teaching, girl. You can talk to anybody. You're a great talker. You're a good presenter. Come on, think about something." And we start talking about the stock market, Wall Street.
Oh,
This is we still friends today. And she said to me, "Think of something else." So in my senior year, I said, maybe I ought to go into business administration
wow.
and then have uh, political science as my.
But Dr. Dukes, you just skipped over something that I'm still a little stuck on. You played basketball in high school. Were girls playing basketball back then?
Oh yes, I mean we wasn't a real team like they are today, but
Uh-huh.
yes, it for recreation at the Y.
Uh-huh.
You had a basketball team,
That's fabulous.
right?
So you
And I
were
was a guard.
you were a guard, a point guard.
Yes.
Oh, well, check you out. So, Dr. Dukes, you've mentioned your family quite a bit, and that both sides of your family, they were educators, and I find that just so progressive, and it speaks to how advanced we were as a people long before we were being credited with this. And you talked about both sides of your family having attended Alabama State University. Well,
No,
at
it
the
was
time,
Alabama State Teachers College doing
Teachers
that.
College at the time.
Yes.
That's, tell us about a little bit about your family and your name. I know there's something very special about your name.
Yeah, very special. My dad parents had twins, and they both died. And the girl was named Hazel Nell, Hazel, and then Nell is the middle name. And the boy was named Cornell. And so when I came along and was and my parents had this girl, they named me after one of the twins had that was deceased.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right.
So, okay, I want to fast forward a little bit and go back to the time that you were in college. Where did you go off to college right after high school?
Alabama State.
And so you chose to go back to Alabama,
Yes.
and is that where you graduated?
No, no. I graduated from Adelphi University in Garden City, New York. I only spent 1 year at Alabama State Teachers College.
And what made you decide to return to New York?
Well, my parents were still here. I went because the grandparents, every summer, we went to Alabama. We returned back home to Montgomery. And of course, as I said, one of the siblings on my dad's side, we kind of grew up together. It was like a 2 year difference in our age, one of my aunts.
Mhm.
And so I went back to college because all of my dad sisters. My mom had only one sister. My dad had other siblings also, and they had all graduated from Alabama State. And so that was the kind of thing that you do. You went back. It was kind of historical for Black families.
So you left the North, went home to Alabama for 1 year, and as a freshman, you became the class president.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, you have to, like anything else, we're going to have class officers, president, secretary, and a treasurer. And so three of us ran for class president, and I won.
And it's that simple. You just do nothing normal. Okay, Dr. Dukes, you graduate from college in New York State. You graduate from Adelphi College. You mentioned before that you studied business administration and political science. What was it that you decided to do, and what was your career path right after college?
Right after college, I worked in Nassau County government. I worked in the law department in Alabama's in Nassau County, 109 lawyers, and I had to assign them different cases, whether the county was being sued for car accident, or whether it was the Department of Children's Services where you were going in, taking children, putting them in foster care, whether it was real estate. So every day I assigned attorneys to these cases. So I did that for 5 years.
And did you go? And I see you went off and got your master's degree.
During that time, yeah, right. About the third year, I went back to Queens College for my master's degree.
And you did that while you were working?
Yes.
Nassau County. You know, you continue to just blow my mind. At any point in time, Dr. Dukes, did you get married and have a family? Do you?
Yes, I have got married, have a son, married, divorced. I have one son, Ronald.
Wonderful. And so you did make time to even have a family in the middle of all of that, Dr. Dukes. So you mentioned.
I think, I had good support. My parents were very supportive of me with childcare, giving me free space and time. So, when you have that kind of support system, it's not so hard.
That is very true. So you mentioned earlier on that you were in church when you were asked to be head up recruiting members for NAACP. Let's talk about how the NAACP really became such an integral part of your life and how you integrated that into your career path.
Yes, I think that I like participation. I don't complain about things that I'm not willing to see change in it or correction. Or if I feel that it's going the wrong way, try to get in to give some support. And so doing the membership drive, talking with many people at the national level, because they come and train you how you to recruit members, and you go through a whole training process. And I saw these women and men in NAACP who was much older, but they had given so much, and then reading the history And don't forget, Rosa Parks was in Montgomery, Alabama.
Mhm.
Rosa Parks didn't stay too far from my grandparents. And so reading about her and hearing about, and don't forget, I never lost tie with Montgomery, Alabama, because my grandparents never, they came to visit in New York, but they never lived in New York. They stayed in the South. So our connection back, returning home, was twice a year. We went back to Montgomery for Christmas. We always had spent Christmas in Montgomery. My dad's oldest sister was in New York, but all the other sisters were in Alabama, not in Montgomery. They were in Birmingham. They had moved out to different parts of Alabama. But we went home because that was the home for us. And so knowing about Martin Luther King, knowing the church, my family had church members that belonged to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. So I had a real interest in what was happening in Montgomery as well as what was happening in New York.
I get it now. So tell me about your next career, how your career evolved, because you left Nassau County after 5 years, you mentioned. By now you have a master's degree. What are you doing with your career at that point?
I took a civil service exam. I was always looking to look at a career ladder. And so there was a job for a supervisor for Nassau County Transportation. It was a state grant. Businesses had began to move out to Nassau County. They were building Roosevelt Field. I don't know whether you know about Roosevelt Field.
Mhm.
There's two counties. There's Nassau County and there's Suffolk County. And so the job market was in those areas, but the Black community lived in Hempstead and Freeport and Roosevelt, and there was no transportation service. So you needed a car to get around. And so as the businesses moved out into those areas, they decided to look at transportation, bus service and train service, but I was not involved in the train, but I was involved in the bus. And so they had engineers, they had architects. And so I was over that program. It was a grant from the state of New York for Nassau, Suffolk County. And it was the grant was renewed over an 8-year time period.
And that grant, you mentioned they had to map out the bus routes.
Yes.
And you oversaw that.
Absolutely. Where the bus hubs had to be placed, how you transferred from one station to another station to get to where the jobs were. And the jobs were in Roosevelt Field. The jobs were in there was a Boeing car facilities start locating in Nassau County and in Suffolk County.
And Dr. Dukes, is it fair to say that you were the first woman to hold such a position, and especially a woman of color?
Well, you got to hear about being the first woman in something very important in my career life.
Tell me about that.
Well, when I left Nassau County, I applied for a job in New York City. I don't know, are you a New Yorker?
I am not, but I know a little something about New York.
Did you ever hear the name Howard Samuels? He ran for governor.
No, ma'am.
Well, Howard, did you ever know about New York City off-track betting?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I came to New York City to work at New York City Off-Track Betting Corporation. I came in as a training manager. I trained those persons who were cashiers and managers. I worked across 4 unions in New York City. I then was promoted in New York City off-track betting to be the director of supplies and administration. That means every Xerox, every store that they open, every plumber, every carpenter, I had to read with the attorneys that they had through their contracts and sign off on them. But
Wow.
when David N. Dinkins, the late 106th and first African American mayor of the city of New York, appointed me as president of New York City all-track betting, there had never been a woman, black or white, that
Okay.
held that position in the racing industry. I became the only and first African-American woman in that position. And I became the chairman of the NAACP Association, where I had a chance to tell Donald Trump to sit down and be quiet.
Okay. I got it. So, Dr. Jukes, you have been around long enough to see America evolve and change. And I think one of probably the most historic things, speaking of first African Americans to hold positions, would be to talk about the inauguration of then President Barack Obama. Speaking of our presidents, what was that like for you? What was that experience like for you? And I know you were actively engaged in helping to make that happen.
In his election process. I did voter registration here in New York. I worked in Philly, knocking on doors, same as I did for Hillary Clinton, same as I did for Joe Biden, although couldn't do too much for Joe Biden, but make phone calls because of the COVID-19. But for Barack Obama, I had worked for Jesse. Well, let me go back and tell you a story about when Shirley Chisholm ran.
There you go.
I was appointed by the late Basil Patterson to be a National Democratic Committee woman. Shirley Chisholm, when she ran for president, I was in Miami, Florida, and she was supposed to be nominated by the late congressman out of California, Ron Dellum. The establishment called Ron Dellum in and asked him not to do that because they wanted the caucus, who was the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. They didn't want to split in the Democratic Party. The late Percy Sutton and the late Mary Pinkett. Mary Pinkett was a city councilwoman. We were walking down the hallway going into the convention center. And Percy Sutton said to a woman standing in the door, "How are things going?" And she said, "Not too good." And he said, "Where is Madam Chisholm?" She said, "She's in here." He walked in and he had a conversation with Shirley, and she told him what had happened. He came back outside and he said to us, "Girls, we are going down. I'm going to nominate Shirley tonight, and I want you all to come out in second." Mary Pinkett and I second Shirley Chisholm nomination in Miami, Florida.
All right.
So to know Shirley Chisholm, a woman who ran and gave Jesse Jackson the insight that if Shirley did it, he could do it.
That's right.
And from Jesse's, that's when we decided that we could have a black mayor in the city of New York. That's right. Because of the registration we had done. So one of the things I want to say on this program, that you remember, you reflect, and people have to be recommitted. The struggle is not a microwave. It is a long, consistent, committed. You have to take, when you get up every day, you have to take the C's, vitamin C. You have to have courage, conviction, and commitment.
You have to take courage, be.
You have to have courage. You have to be courageous, and you have to be committed.
And you must reflect, remember, and what was the third R?
Recommitted.
Recommit. Okay. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen, all from Dr. Hazel Dukes. Dr. Dukes, we have only a 30-minute segment, but I'm going to take the liberty to go over because I think it would be remiss if we didn't ask you, where do you see America going today after the last 4 or 5 years, the pandemic upon us, the economic turndown, the civil unrest of 2020, and then the insurrection attempt of 2021. Did you ever think that you would ever see America in this place so far down the road?
No, I did not. But if you read history and reflect on the struggle of this country, still young, look at from slavery to George Floyd to Breonna Taylor to just 2 weeks ago in Rochester, a 9-year-old child being pepper sprayed, and then 4 years of Donald Trump. Racism, they took off the hood and put on 3-piece suits. And we don't understand, like my parents, my dad, A. Philip Randolph, Barry Rustin, Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer. They saw it naked. They are dressed now. And we have to peel back the onion and have conversation about racism and about discrimination. And some of our people are not willing to have the hard conversations and to stay in the conversation. If I had walked away from the conversation and the hard part, we as a race of people wouldn't be where we are today. It's no mistake that we have come a long ways, but we still have a long ways to go. Because our children in the COVID-19 with remote learning, many of our children of color, they live in areas in homeless shelters where there's no broadband, there's no devices, there's no computer. And so while we made great strides, we have much more to go, many more miles to go.
You know, Dr. Dukes, if this were your last conversation, what would you have me do to carry on the baton? What would you ensure that what message would you want us to get out today?
I want us to be proud as being African Americans. America would not be America if it wasn't for the contributions that we made. I want our young people to hold their head up high, strive for excellence, make it so that this race that have given so much to America, that it gives us back what we rightly deserve. And it's not just tokenism, it's real.
Okay, Dr. Dukes, we will reflect, we will remember, and we will recommit. We will commit, we will connect, and there was a third C. Have courage.
Courage.
How do we stay in touch with you, Dr. Dukes? I know you still have the Hazel N. Dukes and Associates consultant firm. How can we get in touch with you?
My cell, 917-647-4054. And my email address is naacp@nysnaacp.org.
So it's NAACP@NYS.NAACP.
No, not a dot. NAACP@NYS. NAACP.org.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a website that we can find you?
Yes, NY, NYSWWW.
Okay, and NYS NAACP.org.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Dukes, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. I hope that we get a chance to talk again. Please stay well and healthy, stay COVID free, and just continue to do what you do. I don't know how you continue
Thank you so much.
and still have NAACP as a president.
Right. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had the pleasure of talking with the Dr. Hazel N. Dukes, president of the NAACP New York State Conference. And wow, she left us with some gems. And, she said something that got my attention. The hood is off. They're wearing three-piece suits. So reflect, remember, recommit, commit, connect, and stay courageous. And most importantly, she wants our young people to hold our heads up high and be proud. It's Black History, and it's Black History Month, and we're going to reflect. We will remember, and we will stay committed. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Remember, listen to our podcast on www.mocha Podcast Network. And listen to us because this week's episode is already up, and we are talking about race, relationship, and culture. So it's an absolute pleasure to have that conversation and to chat with so many of our fellow couples. We have two couples that we're chatting with this in this podcast. Listen in. We're talking with attorneys Simone Yatrakis and her Yatrakis. We're also talking with yours truly, Natalie V. McKenzie and OBL McKenzie. It's race, relationship, and culture, and it's quite intriguing. Check it out. I'm Natalie B. McKenzie, and we're living life authentically. We'll see you next Monday, same place, same time. Remember, join me on mochapodcastnetwork.com right after this so we can all listen to the podcast. We're listening to race, relationship, and culture. We'll see you next time. Have a great one, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. I wish you enough. Good night.